can one have an impact? For many teens and young adults, it can seem as though our desires to impact the politics and policies of our government are unachievable. How can we transform our abstract wants for change into tangible, influential actions? How can our individual voices be involved in a narrative greater than ourselves? And while the methods of activism have evolved and been refined as our nation has grown, an invaluable step one can take towards defining their voice is by voting. It is a small but crucial choice that starts by learning how to fill and send your ballot.
The first step of the voting process is to submit a voter registration application to your local Board of Elections. To register, you'll need to provide either your state ID number or your driver's license number. Once you're registered to vote, research the policies and promises made by candidates. Consider not only the goals of each politician, but their plans for achieving each goal as well. Once you know who you want to vote for, check Baltimore's Board of Elections to review the rules and regulations of voting. After familiarizing yourself with Baltimore's voting guidelines, use resources like vote.org either to locate a polling place in your area or to order a mail-in ballot. Congratulations! After ensuring you have registered to vote, confirming who you'll vote for, familiarizing yourself with local voting regulations, and deciding whether to vote in person or on paper, you are ready to fulfill your civic duty. Now go cast your vote. Of course, specific rules for voting vary by state. For example, in Maryland, 16-year-olds can register in advance before casting their ballot at 18. Voters may cast their ballots at nearby polling places or by filling out an absentee ballot and sending it in the mail or going to a drop-off location. While certain states like Maryland routinely vote for the same party in every national election, swing states are known to have less consistent political leanings. For example, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Michigan were 4 swing states that voted for the Democratic candidate during the 2020 election, in contrast to voting for a Republican candidate in 2016. These swing states have varying voting laws that may have prompted different election results than those in Maryland. In Pennsylvania, voters can register 15 days prior to Election Day. Absentee ballots in Pennsylvania are not counted until Election Day. In Georgia, voters are eligible to register when they are 17 and a half years old. In Arizona, polling locations close at 7 p.m., but voters can still cast their ballots after closing time. Finally, in Michigan, early voting begins 45 days prior to Election Day. Despite modern efforts to provide equal access to voting, election laws have been a means of suppression in the past.
When we have folks limiting that access, no matter their political party, that is incredibly destructive. And it doesn't help American discourse, doesn't help change policy, doesn't help the forward progress of the country, doesn't really change democracy, doesn't really shape democracy.
A lot of Americans became a lot more familiar with voting by mail because of COVID, and many state legislatures around the country about a year ago decided to have more people vote by mail. But that's a practice that's been actually in existence in a number of states like Colorado and Oregon and Washington. For several years, their elections are solely held via mail. And studies have found that those states, in fact, have much higher rates of voter turnout because they've made the process easier. So political scientists have shown us in the United States that when you remove barriers to voting, voting turnout actually improves.
As many know, voting in the United States was originally made exclusive to land-owning white men. Although states slowly expanded the right to vote to all white men, it was only until the 15th Amendment following the Civil War that the right to vote was extended to all men. In 1870, black men were given the right to vote, and women followed after in 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment. Despite being granted these long overdue privileges on paper, the reality was far from ideal. Access to the polls was unequally accessible. Intentionally tricky literacy tests were required by state law, and many citizens employed intimidation tactics to scare away potential voters. To combat the unjust execution of prior legislation, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 made it illegal to suppress one's right to vote on the basis of race, sexual orientation, and gender. Although this law made it possible for voter suppression to have less of a presence in modern politics, present activists are hard at work to mitigate modern-day voter suppression.
The power of your voice can be really strong. As young adults and as teenagers, we really can't do much. We don't really have much power, but what we do have is our voice. And kind of just being around a lot of those people who are similar mentality of if they use their voice, they can actually make a difference.
Find some solid people to make an organization, to make a group, to try to make some change in the real world. People don't vote online yet, so you got to kind of be tangible in the real world. Just try to be authentic and sincere about it.
And use layman's terms. Don't use legalese. Don't use, in my line of work, we like to say inside baseball terminology. And a lot of that is in the lexicon of voter ID laws and voter registration by default. So you have to use wording and phrases that are universal and everyone understands.
Whether it's filling up a glass of water or a tank of gas, what you consume has a great impact. We live in a consumerist-driven society. Each choice we make represents one's personal beliefs. Pouring a cup of tea or reading a newspaper are mindless tasks, yet these choices put on display one's values. Think before you buy, because your money is an important extension of your voice. Moreover, spending money is not the only form of consumption. Whether you choose to follow a certain celebrity, make a comment on a post, or simply like a photo, these are all extensions of your opinions and can even represent your political beliefs. Following a person or consuming content that may be supportive of a specific political opinion can reflect the opinions and the ideas you promote. So it's important to be careful of how you spend your time on social media. Think about whether your feed represents you and your beliefs. The content that trends on social media also influences the information everyday people are exposed to. For example, on Instagram, the following hashtags trended during the 2020 election. #democracy, #election day, #election, #vote. Additionally, social media sites like Twitter have policies that prevent its users from disrupting election processes through the spread of misinformation. It's unclear to what extent these kinds of policies apply to everyday users as opposed to users with significant media spotlight.
Social media, I would say, has played a huge role in both the voting process of 2020, any movement that's been happening. I feel like, especially mid-pandemic, a lot of people couldn't connect in person. So social media was literally the only way to reach out to people. And I know that a lot of people who weren't as involved before learned a lot through social media that has kind of changed their mindset and how they see things and how they want to act.
I saw out of Georgia, actually, in the runoff elections they had for Senate, was, I thought, a very good use of social media and people power. They were able to engage users, they were able to get out the vote, and they turned a solidly red state for many years into a democratic state.
To understand how increased political activity on social media, the 2020 election, and more has affected teens, here are some Maryland high schoolers who have explained to us their perceptions of modern politics and activism.
The younger generation, Gen Z, should vote because the impact, it will be impactful. Meaning that the way that we impact the world now will determine our future. So the way we're impacted will determine how others is impacted. And when the older gen is not here anymore, we'll be stuck here with all the issues that we didn't resolve or all the problems that we didn't address. Our future is in our hands right now.
When politicians can grab your attention in a way that they did recently, it forces you to focus and think on what's going on around you. Because with all of that drama, it forced people to look at what's going on and bring sort of a focus on social issues and voting as a whole, especially the election.
Because my generation is what's going to be affected most by the policies that the government implements and by the election itself. And this is what we're living through. This is how we're growing up during an incredibly heated climate. An incredibly heated political climate. And because of that, it's so important for us to be involved, because although this government may not be perfect, it's great that we do have a voice and we have to use that.
I cannot vote, but I was posting on social media about my personal beliefs. And I think that that's a way that my generation has found their voice.
We are growing older and, we are the younger generation. As much as we need to have a platform set for us to succeed, we also need to set a platform for ourselves and for future generations to succeed. So we need to, always make sure that our voices are heard, to let the people in power know that we actually do care. There are certain things that we care about, that we want to see action taken, to make sure that our everyday lives are the way that we want them to be, and not for someone to control them. That's how I see it.
And I see that people who are older, like older people in my family, are starting to think, well, is voting even worth it? Like religiously or logically, is it really important to me? And I think that people around my age are taking that voting ability very seriously.
Voter turnout refers to the number of eligible voters who ultimately cast their ballots. Although America has had notably low voter turnout in the past, the recent 2020 election resulted in roughly 66% of Americans fulfilling their civic duty and voting. That's more Americans than any election in the past 120 years. Although both political parties increased their turnout, the reasoning behind the change resulted from separate motivations. For example, the increased turnout of Democrats stemmed from a desire for stronger enforced social justice policies, more cautious and careful COVID-19 combat, and drastic immigration reform. Meanwhile, many Republican voters desired to maintain President Trump, a Republican leader, in the White House after recently enduring President Obama's 8 years as president. Of course, an incredibly valuable and welcome cause for the rising voter turnout was an increase in voters of color. If voter turnout maintains this surge of participation in upcoming elections, our representatives will begin reflecting a more inclusive sample of the American population.
After learning of the value and importance of maintaining engagement in modern politics, all that's left for you to do is act. As we've learned from recent elections and increased activism, every vote, especially yours, counts towards the final decision of our presidents, Senate members, and House representatives. The count doesn't stop until the last vote is marked down. Despite any obstacles that may come with staying informed, the contribution that you make by voting will be crucial to your future. The value of your voice will shine through despite the scale of a national election. That means it matters just as much, if not more, to participate in the decision-making of your own community. Vote on state laws and officials that represent you and your needs. As long as you engage with your community's future, that future will be shaped for the better. Your vote is your voice, and your voice is your power. So be a powerful person. Be educated about what and who you vote for, and use your power to make change.